have our next speaker here today. He's the founder and director of CAMP, which is a Christians and Muslims for Peace. CAMP is an outreach organization based in Southern California and dedicated to promoting peace and understanding between members of the two largest religions in the world, Christianity and Islam. He has authored several books and has appeared on hundreds of national and international radio and television programs. He has also met with many of the world leaders, including Vice President Al Gore, Yasser Arafat, and the President of Syria, just to name a few. He has been nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1997, and he's the recipient of several awards, including the first annual Peace Award in 2001, given by the World Peace Institute, affiliated with the United Nations. So it's our pleasure to call to the podium Dr. William Baker.
That's pretty bad. Some of you are sleeping and you mumbled that. Salam alaikum. That's better. I tell you, when I'm with all the Shias, they really are loud. And I say, boy, they're full of energy and they really mean what they're saying. And I get with some Sunnis. Salam alaikum. All right, brothers and sisters, thank you very much for the great honor to be here, and I'm only sorry my friend Dr. Badwi, he always has to go. I've known this man for years, and we're in conferences outside of this continent and other places all over the world, and it's the same no matter where. I mean, I've been in Egypt with him on the same dais, and his plane, he has to, what? So I called him this morning, we're in the same location, and when I called him, I awakened him. I heard the phone fumbling and falling off of its cradle, so I knew he was trying to sleep. Yes, thank you. I think he received 4 hours of sleep. I'll try not to move around too much because of the videos and so on, but it's my nature to do that a little bit. I often come out in the audience, so be very careful. I may come out there and prod you to keep you awake or something. I think you won't have any problem with it. Now, these technicians, they're a blessing or a curse. And I've had this happen. I've had them knock over and the feedback and you name it. Now, I don't know if that's going to work or not. Is that better? You see? Now, he's a blessing. All right, brother, that's enough. Get out of here. Taking my time. Enough of this business. Let's put it over a little bit more here. Okay, thank you. Well, I wish, I'm thankful, and I say, alhamdulillah, I am, and before any of you ask me later, and actually usually it's the sisters, the Muslimah, I hear them whispering, they say, I tell you, he's Muslim. And the others say, no, yeah, but he doesn't want to tell anyone. He wants to. Why would I not tell someone? I mean, that you, to witness it, whether you are a follower of Allah, you witness. So anyway, you be the judges. All I know is that what you'll hear me say is now the result of 42 years of studying Islam, learning Arabic in Jerusalem in 1967, perfect timing for me to go to Jerusalem, as a student studying archaeology. And we had to learn Arabic, obviously, and Hebrew. So any of the Yehudi who are here, see me later, we'll read the Torah together. And if you want to speak Greek or learn about the Greek, I also have that ability. Or Latin, Vulgate, or, well, anywhere else you go. That's why Dr. Badwi and I enjoy each other so much. What a wonderful man in his humility. I thank him for his comments. I don't feel I need any apologies for anything I've said and written in my life. The 3 books he was talking about, very quickly, they're here. I've had people ask me already, and they're in the back. The Theft of a Nation, The Theft of Palestine. I make no apologies for this book. I lived in Palestine. My heart is filled with tears as I stand before you. I'd love to talk about that issue as he did. He put it beautifully. But my fondest memories are walking through the souk in Al-Quds, in Jerusalem. And we excavated right near the Haram al-Sharif, the Wailing Wall it's called. And I would walk every day from that early morning with lights because of the heat. We would start excavating, and then as the heat and the sun rose, we would stop because we were finished for our day. Then we would take our pottery and findings back to our dwelling, which was the St. George, St. George College on Saladin Street. If you know it, you know where it's at. So I lived in Palestine. I became a Palestinian because I was with these people day in and day out, and I loved them. And I saw their honesty and integrity and truthfulness and humility. And not only did no Muslim Palestinian ever say to me, "You're an infidel." If you've heard Dr. Badwi at all, you know he would really give you a lashing from Quran. Anyone who says that non-Muslim is an infidel. Those who are submitted to Allah, Christian, Yehudi, who really, the one God, you're not an infidel. Now, and this is exactly why we're not together. The two largest religions on this planet, right now, more than half the world population while we're here in Toronto, are Christian and Muslim. A little over 6 billion people now on this planet. About 3.2 billion are Muslim and Christian. And my dream and my vision and the message and the call that Allah has given me many years ago, after finding out and studying and practicing my Arabic in Jerusalem, reading the Quran. My instructor said, if you really want to learn classical, great Arabic, William, read the Quran. I read the Quran. I meet Muslims all over the country, especially here in North America and the West, who can't read Arabic. Shame on you. There's nothing like reading it as it was given and received originally. Same with the Injil. Same with the Torah. This is why we have all these claims by false leaders and teachers who divide and conquer. Well, theft of a nation, the theft of Palestine, I witnessed it. Going through the souk every morning, 7 days a week. And as soon as they were getting their shops open, and you know the souks, there's the butcher street, and it's all meat. There's the cobbler who does the shoes and the leather work, that's that street. That's all that's there. And each one of them got to know me by name, and I knew their name. And each time I'd walk through, they'd say, "William, Habaz Baker. William must sit with us and have shy." So I'd sit and have shy. I go down about another 5 blocks, and here's another, "William, you must have shy." By the time I returned to my residence at St. George's College, I was up all night. Because I had probably 20 cups of shy. But that's okay. It was wonderful to sit with them. And I would say to the Arab people of the world, how in the world you have a special gift from Allah, because you can stay up all night talking of politics and everything else, and then you go to the shops tomorrow. I can't keep up with them. Palestinian people, the Chechnyan people, the Kashmiri people, the Lebanese people, Lebanon. I've been in all those countries. This book is either loved or hated, and I think that's exactly what truth does from the Almighty. Those who love truth will hear it and know it and receive it, and those who hate it will hate it and despise it. And there is not one prophet, including the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon them, and upon all of them, who were not hated and rejected and assailed, even in their lifetimes. And the sister who just spoke to us is still happening. So, this book, and when you write a book, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, those enemies of Allah and truth and of truth and honesty, they will find something in that book, take a pair of scissors and cut one verse out or one sentence, and then twist it and say you're saying something else. Such is your risk when you go and write something like this. But I'm thankful to Allah. This is around the world. It's in 4 languages. It's here. The next book I wrote was Kashmir, Happy Valley, Valley of Death, the suffering of the Kashmiri people. I, as a Christian American, was asked by a group of Kashmiri leaders in America who were Kashmiri but have never been in Kashmir, cannot go back. on a CNN television program where I was speaking, and they called the studio. Would you go to Kashmir? What? Kashmir is sealed. It's death to go into Kashmir, in the valley of Kashmir, on the Indian side of occupied Kashmir. I went. This Christian went to document the atrocities and human rights violations and slaughter of Kashmiri men and women and children in Kashmir. And I promised them, if Allah spares my life, I will write your story and I will be your voice in the West. This is the book. And the photos are mine. The photographs are mine. They're not borrowed from anyone else, as you'll see, because I'm in most of them, because I thought I would really die there. When I left my family in America, I said, I probably won't be back here. Do not seek my body from the U.S. government if they kill me there. Let me be buried with the Kashmiris. So that's what that book is about. And you know, I don't just write books about how bad things are. Every book I write has a solution, in my estimation, in my opinion of 40 years now, how these things can be resolved, if men were honest. Politicians, religious leaders, everybody. Finally, this book. And I guess this one's the most dangerous of all. I become a dangerous man. Dr. Bobby always says, there's that dangerous man. Because truth is a dangerous thing. Because it cuts like a blade of Allah that has double edges. And cuts anything in front of it. More in common than you think, the bridge between Islam and Christianity. Finally wrote it. How much do we have in common? I know more Muslims who know nothing about my faith, and I know more about Islam. There'll be some here today who say, you know, that you're more Muslim than we are. And I say, shame on you. You know more of the Quran, then double shame on you. If you knew more of the Injil than I would be shamed. It's there for us to know. All these centuries, we together belong together against, and we need to stand together with hand in hand against injustice, brutality, the innocent who are being slaughtered and occupied. There's only, you know, since man was placed on this earth by Allah, there's only been two actual instances of reality. There are the oppressed and the oppressor. There are the guilty and the innocent. That's it. Think about it. From time to beginning. Well, I'll be glad to talk with you later and take any questions you have. I just want to tell you about Jerusalem because it's in my heart. It'll always be in my heart. And Haram al-Sharif, I've walked it many times, and I'm sure some of you have never been there. And the Mosque al-Aqsa, I've prayed in the Mosque al-Aqsa. So, amazing, isn't it? Now, let me just give you an easy answer of who is this guy. I am probably the only Christian Muslim or Muslim Christian, whatever you want. But I'll tell you, absolutely, I know that I don't believe. I know that the Quran and Gabriel gave that message to the Prophet, peace be upon him. I've read it, I've studied it in Arabic, and I can tell you, I see the strong, same message from Isa and Musa and Ibrahim, Hosea. And the same angel even was working on all of us, Gabriel. So, where else do I find a religion close to my Christianity? Where else do I find a people who love Isa and Maryam? As the Grand Mufti Koftaro, my wonderful, wonderful friend who just passed recently into paradise from Syria, known each other for 25 years. And I know he once told me if we were discussing our differences, he kept bringing up the common ground, and I kept saying, but we're different. He said, but we're the same. And this was in his home in Damascus, in Cham, in Damascus. And finally, he put his hand and his little white beard on my shoulder, and he said, oh, brother, you can't be a true Muslim if you don't love Isa. Wow. Wow. That got my attention. And as the sister said, to live faith, and as Dr. Badwi said, ladies and gentlemen, one thing I've observed in my quick comments today, and the sister touched a little bit on it, actually, and I think all our speakers probably will in some way. Tomorrow, Sunday, marks the 37th year of my speaking around the world for peace, between the largest two faiths in the world. And I have observed Islam coming into the West all of my life, 67 years now, but especially the last 35 to 37. And I'm here to give you the message that really is more important than Palestine to me, more than Lebanon, More than occupation? More than Kashmir? That's right. And I say it from my heart, because I can't speak otherwise. If it doesn't come, it's like I was speaking at the dedication of a mosque in Los Angeles, California, the King Fahd Mosque. I had no idea why the Saudis asked me to speak, but they did. Had John Sununu, Reagan's cabinet chief, there as well, he and I. And the king sent his son, Abdulaziz Fahd. And I sat with him at the dais. I said, I'll sit there. No, you sit up here. And when I spoke from my heart with no notes, nothing. I usually do. And after I was finished, he said, I must have a copy of your speech. I said, there is no copy. It's from here. And he said, I knew it. No man speaks this way unless it's from his heart. So what I'm going to say with you, to you, and with you, is not at you, but I'm speaking with you. Islam and the West. My concern for many years now, and it's accelerated as I'm standing here today, I am concerned that Islam, will it survive the struggle against the growing immorality and decadence of the West? I really mean that. I believe not only America, Canada, but the whole Western civilization, including those European, everybody, we're at a crossroads of deterioration and failure. We're winding down, spiraling down. The zenith was reached. And you know why we're spiraling down? I can tell you why it is in America, and I think Canada. Immorality, the lack of values. We're missing it, and young Muslims are not living Islam. Let me wake you up, parents. Young Muslims go to Jummah, and they pray, and ablution, and then they go out and have a beer. How do I know that? Because I speak in these Muslim groups all over America and here in Canada, the MSA. And when I speak, they cry later and they say, can we talk to you later? And I talk with them and they say, you broke our hearts. Our parents think we're the Jummah, don't miss Jummah. And then we're out dancing, we're out drinking. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what happened to Christianity in the West. That's exactly what happened to Christianity and why we lost our potency. Isa said it in a parable one time. He said, you are like salt on the earth that Allah has poured on the world. And that salt is to preserve and to cleanse impurities and to make pure the meat and the other items Allah has provided for you. He said, when salt loses its favor or impact and chemical ability to preserve, he said it's not fit for anything except to be thrown out into the street and stepped underneath the feet. That's what's happened to Christianity. I tell you as a Christian. And now it must not happen to you, because I stand here to tell you as a Christian American, Islam is a gift to the West. I've said this in churches. Nothing I'm saying here I haven't said in churches and conventions and conferences. Oh my goodness. By the way, don't say, I appreciate the takbir and Allahu Akbar. But you know, sometimes that's okay. And then when I say, now what are we going to do about this? Inshallah. How about getting these books in the hand of every daggone member of parliament and this new prime minister, educate them a little bit. Inshallah, you know, we build a new mosque. We have to build a driveway. And, let me tell you, we've been down that road as Christian Americans. We built the big mosques. We built the big churches. And they're empty now. They're empty. And your mosques and masjids are going to be no different if you repeat our mistakes. And the threat to you is a threat to me is the same threat. It's secularism, humanism, and the elimination of God from life. And that's it. In the year 2002, the United States led the world in teenage pregnancies. 2002. Among young women between the ages of 13 and 16, they're getting pregnant in America. Abortions increased in those years 30%. The rate of women in the West, in America especially, the same period, 17% increase. I remember Nikita Khrushchev. Anybody here old enough to remember this guy's name? Nikita Khrushchev, leader of Russia. In the old days with Nixon and those guys. He was visiting a dairy farmer in America. And a reporter asked him and said, Mr. Khrushchev, Do you still feel that you're going to invade and occupy? You know, we're all afraid of the Russians. We're all afraid of the Russians. And they said, are you still going to attack, or you think there'll be a war between our two countries? He said, no. There'll never be a war between Russia, or actually he said in those days, Soviet Union and America, because he said, America is deteriorating before our very eyes morally. And he said, America will drop as if a rotten fruit from the tree limb, and no one will need to pluck it. It will fall to the ground. I'm telling you, brothers and sisters, that's true. The man was right, as much as I hate to give a communist any credit. As the number of American Muslims continues to increase, and I believe I know it's about 10 million in America, maybe 2 to 3 million here. As it continues to increase around the Western world through conversions and immigration, I'm telling you this. The question is, will you sustain your faith in this fabric of the West, this social fabric? The greatest challenge to Islam and both your ability to retain and practice your values and teachings on Islam is right now struggling against immorality and the valueless presentations of society in the West. Now hear me well. If you've got a home with a satellite television and you don't know what your young people or you adults are watching, shame on you again. I'm going to prove something to you today. Oh boy, I don't know. Some of you are probably saying, gosh, I came here just to hear some general talk. This guy's giving me a khatab. At the time of the prophet, peace be upon him, both Jews and Christians, and you know this is not new. History says, and it is replete with these illustrations, and I'm a history person. I taught it 8 years in college, Middle East history. The true teachings and tenets of Christianity, and I tell you this as a Christian openly, the teachings of Isa and his disciples only lasted 200 years after Isa left here. Did you hear me? 200 years. Isa's teachings and the message Allah sent him to give was followed, and only for 200 years, and it was gone. Men took it over, men got together, and they decided. Well, that was at the time of the prophet. And you all know, all of you surely understand that, and sometimes I have Muslims and Muslims who don't know this. The prophet, peace be upon him, himself said, what? This is not a new message from Gabriel to replace Judaism or Christianity. It is a message to awaken them back to their roots of the Torah and Musa and Isa and the Injil. That's what the prophet, peace be upon him, said. And he even told those who embraced this message from Gabriel, when you pray, face Jerusalem. Am I shocking anyone? I see some eyebrows. Yeah, some facial movement. Well, you need to do a little more reading about Islam. And, okay. The question of the hour, as I get halfway through this, is twofold. I'm going to answer these questions and suggest some answers. Can Islam, now in the West, withstand the destructive forces of decadence and immorality? That's a real challenge. Secondly, at the same time, can you have the magnitude of influence here in the West that you are determined and should have, because that's why Allah brought you here. Allah brought Islam to the West, and I said it 25 years ago in churches. Thank God, alhamdulillah, that Islam is coming. Maybe we can get people back to faith before God. Maybe we can get God back in our life, in our country, and our children, and morals and values and family, and maybe. Now I'm at that point of maybe not, for what I'm seeing happen to these successive generations of Muslims in the West. Taken away by the beauty and the trickery and the finery of Shaitan and Iblis. Clothing. Let me tell you, I was recently giving a lecture at Utah State University. There were a couple of young Muslims. I asked them if they were Muslim. They said they were. Afterwards, they were sitting out about some of you in the midway there, and they kept talking to these young student females. Now, the females weren't wearing any hijab. They're just sitting there with the tight jeans and the rest. Very American, very Western. And when I was through speaking, they came up to me and, oh, you know, nice speech. And I said, hey, are you Muslim? Oh, yeah. I said, well, that gold chain around your neck, that pierced ear, and talking the whole time I presented my presentation to those women, those girls, I would never have guessed you were Muslim. And you know something, according to what I know about Islam, you're not. What's happening to those young men and women? What's happening to them? They're being carried away. And they're being carried away and destroyed, as did Christians and Jews and anybody else who wants to have a moral life and make a difference. The only way Allah can bless the world, brothers and sisters, is through us. We who serve Him, love Him, and stand for the truth, and speak the truth. And not just speak to be appreciated, applauded, or recognized as wonderful. 1968, I was teaching in a Christian college. I started a program of outreach for what they call street people, homeless, young people, old, everybody. Because I saw all these needs, and in that college they would talk about Jesus said, the poor you have with you, you should do this, you should do that. And we have the same thing in Islam, do you not? It is not turning your head left to right and pray. That's not it. It's when you care for the poor, the widows, the oppressed. That is Islam. That also is faith, and that is Judaism and Christianity. Well, I started these programs. I saw the children of the streets coming from the highest divorce rate in America and in the world right now. 1 out of every 2 marriages in America fails in divorce. Do you hear me? 1 out of every 2. Only 4 years ago it was 1 out of every 3. I can remember it was 1 out of 25. 1 out of 2 failed. I saw in those centers that I started, and by the way, I called them His place, meaning Allah. And I remember I was asked to come to Congress, the U.S. Congress in Washington, and testify. How are you doing this, Professor Baker, without grants from the government and all that? And what's the name of your organization? I said, His place. They couldn't understand. They could not grasp that mentally. You know why? Because they don't know who He is. They said, finally one congressman said, who is this? His place. I said, it is God's place. I said, now I think I know why America's in trouble. If you hear me today, you know I said it. My friends, the very first problem, and my fear, and it is a fear, and it's genuine, marriage in the West is dying. Do you hear me? Marriage in the West is dying. And what's happened to those young men and women? What's happening to them? They're being carried away. And they're being carried away and destroyed, as did Christians and Jews and anybody else who wants to have a moral life and make a difference. The only way Allah can bless the world, brothers and sisters, is through us. We who serve Him, love Him, and stand for the truth, and speak the truth. And not just speak to be appreciated, applauded, or recognized as wonderful. 1968, I was teaching in a Christian college. I started a program of outreach for what they call street people, homeless, young people, old, everybody. Because I saw all these needs, and in that college they would talk about Jesus said, the poor you have with you, you should do this, you should do that. And we have the same thing in Islam, do you not? It is not turning your head left to right and pray. That's not it. It's when you care for the poor, the widows, the oppressed. That is Islam. That also is faith, and that is Judaism and Christianity. Well, I started these programs. I saw the children of the streets coming from the highest divorce rate in America and in the world right now. 1 out of every 2 marriages in America fails in divorce. Do you hear me? 1 out of every 2. Only 4 years ago it was 1 out of every 3. I can remember it was 1 out of 25. 1 out of 2 failed. I saw in those centers that I started, and by the way, I called them His place, meaning Allah. And I remember I was asked to come to Congress, the U.S. Congress in Washington, and testify. How are you doing this, Professor Baker, without grants from the government and all that? And what's the name of your organization? I said, His place. They couldn't understand. They could not grasp that mentally. You know why? Because they don't know who He is. They said, finally one congressman said, who is this? His place. I said, it is God's place. I said, now I think I know why America's in trouble. And if you hear me today, you know I said it. My friends, the The very first problem, and my fear, and it is a fear, and it's genuine, marriage in the West is dying. Do you hear me? Marriage in the West is dying. And I've just given you the divorce rates. We continue to produce an army of children that are flooding our social systems, products of divorce. The incident of violence and criminal acts among this group shows the unhealthy atmosphere of these children as they're born into a divorced family. I don't care what anyone says. Allah said in the beginning He created Adam and Eve. It was never Adam and Steve. Now, a child is destined by Allah Himself to have a father and a mother. Period. Period. Some states and cities advertise quick divorces in my country now, and you start to get a few here. You got the money, you pay the fees. Believe it or not, they even have drive-through windows in America where you get a divorce right out of the car. It's a fact. It's a fact. And you know, I read the Quran, Surah 17, ayah 23 and 24. The Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, that you be kind to parents. This is the second area of deterioration that I'll leave you with. First are the marriages. Marriage is becoming non-popular. Now just boys and girls, young men and women live together and play house. That's it. And then they fight and argue and they go to a judge and say, he took and she took and he, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're not even married. There's no commitment. There's no love. There's no presence of spirituality or union of souls and hearts and responsibility. Yeah. Surah 17, 23 and 24 ayah. Whether one or both of your parents attain old age in your life, say not a word of contempt to them, nor repel them, but address them in terms of honor. And out of kindness, lower to them the wing of humility. And say, my Lord, bestow on them thy mercy, even as they cherished me in my childhood. The fastest growing industry in the West, including Canada and the UK, is housing America's elderly. This is the biggest money making now next to pharmaceuticals and insurance in the world. And they call them seniors now. We used to call them mom and dad, grandpa and grandma. Now they're seniors, a category. You know, once you let these politicians and others put a label on you, they can handle you. That's why they have such difficulty with me. Are you Christian? Well, what denomination? No, I'm just a believer in Isa. Yeah, but that's not enough. I got to have a label. And now some of you will leave here. Is he Muslim? Is he Christian? Well, you'll have trouble the rest of your life. The fastest growing industry now is retirement centers. You've heard of them. They're here. And I love the care facilities. No facility and no paid. $50,000 is the minimum in America, across America. $50,000 a year to keep a parent, a father, or a mother in a home, a care facility. And no amount of money can provide the care that that family and children and grandchildren can provide that person. You can't buy that kind of care. But that is exactly what's happening. So you have a breakdown of marriage. You have the breakdown of parental relationship to a family structure. Are you getting it? I thank Allah. I say, alhamdulillah, I'm a Native American. I'm not from Europe. Please write that down somewhere. When those Europeans came on their boat, they love in America to say, my great-great-grandfather came in on the Mayflower and landed. I say, well, wonderful. My great-great-grandfather was there to meet your boat. Let me tell you. And then what'd you do? You got immediately off and put beer cans all over the place. Children in the West grow up occasionally, if ever, visiting now their parents and never their grandparents on special events and holidays. The opportunity to learn from my grandparents is one of the greatest things I ever inherited from my parents. Because I was blessed to be in a home where Native Americans, we keep our loved ones with us till death. And I loved every Sunday and every night when I had a dinner table. There was no television. We sat there and talked about each other and our problems and shared with each other. And I learned from my grandparents their wisdom and from their experience. That's what makes a country great and a people and a religion great. revering as the prophet, peace be upon him, said, as Jesus taught us to love and honor and obey our parents, as Musa gave that as one of the 10 words or 10 commandments. Honor your father and mother that your days may be long, Musa said. Wow. We're not doing it. Fragmented. Marriage, family. In the Torah, Prophet Musa, I just said this, but let me give it to you in Chodas, or Exodus 20, verse 12. Honor your father and mother that you may live long in the land the Lord your God is giving you. The fifth commandment, the fifth word, as it's called in the Hebrew. It doesn't have commandments, just words when you read it in Hebrew. That fifth word is the first of the 5 that has a promise. Respect, honor, and take care of your parents, and God will bless you with a long life. That's quite a promise. What's also true? The alternative. If you don't, you're not. So you might as well check out early. It is said in the Islamic world, if I know anything about Islam all over this world, quote, there are no old people's homes. I've always loved that. There are no old people's homes. But we in the West need to return to the restoration of the family with parents, grandparents, and children once again taking their own positions, making the family whole again. We have a youth cult in the West. You see it in Canada. It's everywhere. No one wants to get old. Women don't get old anymore. Mothers want to act like teenagers. Let me say to you parents, fathers, your sons don't need a buddy or a friend. They need a father. And your daughters do not need a little sister to run to the movie or somewhere with them. They need a mother. Okay? Wow. Guys don't like it. That's right. It's only time to do it before our love takes our life. We're gone. And finally, look out for this one, because this affects everybody everywhere, especially here in the West and in Canada, right down the alley. The third danger to Islam becoming, you'll be around. Islam will be around. But the question is, will you have the impact and effect that Allah intended when you came here? To call back those who have left God back to the roots of worship to Allah. That's really, we're talking about dawah. Dawah is living Islam. Dawah is people seeing Islam. Not hearing it, seeing it. All right. Well, knowledge of God has gone from the Western society. I'm going to quote one of the prophets, Hosea 4, or Surah 4, ayah 1 through 6. Hear the word of the Lord, you, and who's he talking to? Israelites. Now, please, Israelites are not Israelis. There's a big difference between them. Israelites, as my dear brother and wonderful friend Dr. Bodway said, there were 9 Semitic peoples, descendants of Shem, the third son of Noah. Shem, Ham, and Japheth. The Semites were 9 Semitic historical peoples that I've excavated their remains. The Arabians were one. The Phoenicians were one. The Hebrews were one. There are many others. The Arabians, Arabs. But he says to the Israelites who were Hebrews, because the Lord has a charge against you who live in the land he gave you, for now there is no faithfulness, and tune into this, no love, and this one, no acknowledgement of God in the whole land. Chosen of God. And they have deteriorated to this point where there was no presence of God in the whole place called biblical, historical Israel. The promised land. And he concluded with this, my people are destroyed from the lack of knowledge of God. Well, I'm telling you, that's a reality at your doorstep. During the reign, I don't even need to get into that. I'll just say this. The number one sin that led to the destruction and then the assimilation and the elimination of Hebrews from the face of the earth was their turning away from God, Allah, the one God of all mankind. And both biblical and secular history record that destruction, permanent collapse of the Hebrews and their dissemination. Theft of a nation has a lot of that history in it. Now, what did Jesus say about the importance of keeping God in your mind? And I'm going to get to education right now as I wrap it up. This is in the Gospel of Matthew,
22, Surah 22, ayah 34 through 37. Hearing that Jesus had sentenced or silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together. One of them, an expert in the law of Moses, tested Isa and said with this question, "Teacher, what's the greatest commandment in the law of Moses or Musa?" And Jesus said, "Love the Lord your God." Get it? Love the Lord your God with all your heart. I do love him. With all your soul. Oh, I feel him. And with all your mind. The first two don't count if you don't have all three together, brothers and sisters. You educational people. You people from the university. I've got my education. I studied at Queen's College in Oxford. And I've never met some of the dumbest people I've ever met. When you remove God from your mind, you have no God. The mind is tied to the soul and the heart. You can't have one without the other. And Jesus said, that's the greatest commandment of all. To love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, and soul. This command to love the Creator and He alone with all our heart and soul, and submit ourselves and obey the commands and demands He's revealed through the prophets, all of them. Perhaps this command is the one thing that ties us together as Christians and Muslims. To love Allah with all our heart, soul, and mind. That's the one basis that would bring us together. Aristotle, I'm an amateur Aristotelian philosophy. I loved Aristotle's writings. I mean, if you've got a lot of time on your hand, you have nothing else to do, study philosophy. But I got caught up in a little bit of that in England. But Aristotle said something very, very profound 2,300 years ago. Quote, "Consideration must be given to this question. What constitutes real education? And what is the proper way to be educated?" Wow. What? 2,300 years ago? That's right. Young Muslim students, along with millions upon millions of other young men and women in Europe, North America, and the West, are still today being taught there's no room in science, there's no room in knowledge, there's no room in life or society for an all-powerful, all-knowing Creator God. In other words, true education and knowledge has no need for a God. Men are so ignorant that they think there is no Creator. We just fell out of a mass of energy floating around in space. They called it evolution. I know Muslims who believe trying to reconcile that. Well, we've done that for you. Christians did this in 1500 AD. When they said theistic evolution, that's the way out of this. We don't want to appear ignorant and say that Allah really created a man from mud and blood and created the first race. We don't want to say that. That's ignorance. That's backward. So we'll say Allah, theistic, God allowed evolution through animals. Are you kidding me? If you want to think you came from an animal, good luck. You go free to free it and believe it. And I do say a lot of people act like they really are animals. That's what happens when Allah and God is taken from your life. As a creator, He gives us life. You know, the number one question I'm asked by Christians in churches, why are you going to Sudan? I just came back from Sudan, Africa. That's right. A Christian, again, asked to go into Darfur. I wanted to see if these Muslims are selling Christians and taking them as slaves and raping them. And the Janjaweed. Have you all heard of the Janjaweed? According to the media here in the West, they're everywhere. They hide out in trees. They're thicker than the leaves of trees. And the Islamic government of Sudan is behind it. I wanted to find out if that's true, just like I went to Kashmir, just like I went to Palestine, just like Chechnya I was about to go, and we got intercepted by the Russians on the way. That's another story. Let me tell you this. What I found that indeed the Sudan government is not persecuting Christians. The Sudan government is feeding them. The refugees, almost 2 million that I visited, a lot of them down in the Darfur, out in the desert, the Sahara Desert, for 4.5 days. And I was there 21 days. And I can tell you this, every single person I visited in every single tribe, and I met with 18 tribal leaders, and there are 400 tribes, 300 languages, and Allah knew this before William Baker was born because He allowed me to learn Arabic. And Arabic is the one thread that holds all those tribes together. 300 dialects, 400 tribes, but we can understand one another. We talk about peace, and we found the truth. You know, people ask me, and they asked me before I went to Sudan, I went to my heart guy. I go once a year just to give him a thrill. My cardiologist. Oh, it looks good. Where are you going now? I said, I'm going to Sudan. Sudan? Are you crazy? I said, no, you should say it in Arabic. Majnun? Are you crazy, William? Why? He said, that's the last place on earth I'd go. You know what I said to him? I said, you'd be the last person they'd invite. The truth is, he said, I'm fearful for your life, William. You've been in Kashmir, you survived that. Palestine, you've had 2 attempts on your life in America. That's right. I've had actual attempts on my life. And he said, aren't you, I don't want to see you. There's a lot of good you can, and I said, look, Allah creates William Baker. You may not believe it, but he created you too. And I breathe today because Allah gives me this breath. Not one hair of my head will be harmed until Allah permits it. My family believes that. My wife believes that. My daughters believe that. And we don't just believe it, we know it. You know, existentialism is an ugly thing, and I'll wrap it up with this. The idea that God is out of education. Science is the answer. We worship science. Science will give us the answer. We don't say, oh, what's going to happen here? Well, maybe scientifically they'll come up with a cure for AIDS. Allah has a cure for AIDS. You're not immorality. And let me ask you why Sudan is the only African country that doesn't have an AIDS epidemic. Think about it. It's a true Islamic country. They don't have sex outside of marriage. Simple answer. Yeah, it's called morality. It's called self-control. It's calling obedience to God and doing what's right. And you don't get into these things. Hear me well. Existentialism. Science will give us a cure for AIDS. No. If there's ever a cure, Allah will give it. Everything that man has received, every good gift comes from Allah. Every good gift. Medicine, science, technology, it's all from Allah. Every single bit. You know, I'll never forget, I debated, this is my last illustration. Now I'm going to cut it short so we get 16 other people up here. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, I remember debating at Oxford University, the head of the philosophy department at the Queen's College. They heard there was this Christian studying there, and he said, do you believe in God and creation? You believe you actually were created? And I said, well, yeah. Oh, you're in Oxford. I said, yeah, I believe you created Oxford too. Oh, well, I don't front there. Outrageous. And then he said, let's have a debate if you don't mind. I said, fine, when do you want to have it? We had it on Saturday, right at the square of the Oxford. If you've ever been to Oxford, it's a wonderful place, intellectual, pseudo-intellectual, a lot of it, but intellectual. It was fun. Kind of like Hyde Park Square, where you put a ladder up and speak on anything. Same at Oxford. But he versus me, this little guy, Christian, heading over there, way over there, gets this giant. It was good. He said, my premise, he was first, he just said simply, this is what's happening today in eroding Islam, Christianity, Judaism, everything, and morality around the world. Because there's no God left. Remember Hosea? You have no God. You've taken God from your knowledge and your life. There is no knowledge of God in the land, and you will perish. That's what the prophet said, Hosea. Well, he started off by saying, I said, nothing's right or wrong. No one can say to you or me, that's wrong or that's right. If it feels like it's right to you, then it's right. If it's wrong for me, it's wrong for me. But no one can tell you this is absolutely right or wrong. In fact, he said, there are no absolutes. Now, don't tune out on me right here. There are no absolute rights or wrongs. In fact, there are just no absolutes. Nothing's absolutely anything. And it was my turn. I said, Professor, you said there are no absolutes and nothing's absolutely right or wrong. Are you absolutely sure of that? Now, some of you just went like that. The rest of you explain it when we get outside. And he did what you did. He kind of laughed. He didn't want to, but he laughed at the silliness of his proposition. And I said, and are you absolutely sure there are no absolutes? Well, he said it with profound, convincing truth. There are no absolutes. How do you know? But I'm so sure that there are, you can't be sure. He said, I'm sure you can't be sure. This is philosophy. This is the vain philosophies of men, replacing God and the messengers of Allah. Why would you trade them for that? I wrote my own little analogy, and I said, Existentialism, exit God is what that means. There was a guy named Friedrich Nietzsche. How many of you students know Nietzsche? He's the one in Germany who said, he stared at the sun for 3 days and he came down from his house. Now, anybody who stares at the sun for 3 days, there's something needs to be examined. He stared at the sun, he's a philosopher, Nietzsche. Stared at the sun for 3 days and he came down and he said, I have an announcement. What, you're blind? No. I discovered there is no God. It's Nietzsche who first discovered God's death. He came to, and the world received him. Bertrand Russell, all of them, they couldn't gravitate to him fast enough. Finally, we got rid of God. Nietzsche came down and said, there is no God. Well, where was the funeral? I didn't hear anything about it. It should have been on CNN or CTV or Canadian television. Anyway, because he said there's no God. Well, here come all the philosophers, the will to rant, the will to power, Adolf Hitler believing that stuff, all in all, it spawned all of that. Man's his own God. Man creates himself. Man will save himself. He needs no salvation through Allah. Well, Nietzsche died. When he died in an asylum. You university students should know that. Pounding his head against a padded wall. And he wrote a last treatise, they called it, and the title of it was, Oh God, if there be a God, I cannot bear it if I'm not you. What? When they sold his house and possessions in Stuttgart, Germany, they were selling his house and possessions. He had no offspring. Actually he had done it, they said, on the 4th day after he stared at the sun and discovered God's death, he wrote with black paint on his fence, God is dead, signed Nietzsche. This was 6 days after they had the sale of his property and his house. And the auctioneer noticed something and they said, look, what's happened on that fence? Someone had come along with red ink and painted, Nietzsche is dead, signed God. I will close with that comment, brothers and sisters. Listen to me. Islam is taking root in the West, and I'm happy to see it. It's still a minority religion, but to me, Islam is like a fresh wind blowing across the West, bringing the promise of cleansing rain, which might once again purify and quench the thirst of those of us longing for a return to our Creator. You got to live it. Parents, you can't send them and talk and go to Juma and then literally live like hell. Students, you young men and women, it's your responsibility. If your parents hide, and I know how it is. Goodness, there were people who said, William Baker's coming up there. You heard Dr. Baldwin. You're bringing that rabble-rouser up there? We want to just get along. Well, get on along. You're here for a purpose. You're only here, and Allah has a purpose for every single one of us, or we wouldn't be sitting in this auditorium today. You wouldn't breathe another breath, and your heart would stop now. And it will when Allah says it's time. That's the power of the Creator. Thank you very much. By the way, I even got a guy who agrees with me in America, Jimmy Carter. We've known each other for about 15 years, personally, because when I go to Sudan, I went to his clinics there for the eyes and so on, and we kind of help one another. Our Endangered Values by Jimmy Carter. America's Moral Crisis. Canada's more, you put, just change the word. It's all there. Thank you very much.
Takbir. Alhamdulillah, that was a fascinating discussion that we just heard, and quite lively, entertaining at points. We should all take the advice that we learned here. We come to these conferences to learn, and our good friend has told us that as Muslims we should increase our knowledge, learn Arabic. Let's try to be the best Muslims we can by example, inshallah. So right now,